2 rounds into the 2025 MotoGP season, it's pretty clear who's got something to be happy about. That's anyone with the surname Marquez. For everybody else, it's varying degrees of could do better, some more so than others. This is the Race MotoGP Podcast. I'm Matt Beers. Simon Patterson is finally back in his house. Did you recognise it, Simon?
I recognised my house, but the dog didn't recognise me, so go figure.
Understandable. Dog last saw Simon approximately Boxing Day. Val, you haven't had to leave your house at all, at least, but I was going to say we're getting a slight pause, but we're not, because we're also covering F1's Chinese Grand Prix around the time that we're recording this, so you've just got 4-wheeled overnight angst rather than 2-wheeled late afternoon angst. I asked you two who was in most trouble after these first 2 rounds of the season. You had kind of similar thoughts. You both went for the same sorts of teams and riders straight away, which, rather than your usual disagreement. Top of the list pretty much was KTM, and we promised in last week's episode that we would get into KTM's plight. We talked so much about their financial situation over the winter. We came to the conclusion the season might not be as bad as all that suggested. 2 rounds and it's looking at it like it might be. Brad Binder's done the odd Brad Binder thing in a race and appeared in the top 10 out of nowhere. Pedro Acosta's had the odd good single lap moment, but overall, pretty grim. In the Race Members Club on Patreon, the tone about KTM is basically wall-to-wall doom. Hayes says, is it time to hit the panic button on KTM's performance? Do you all think that Joan Mir passing Pedro Acosta on merit in a dry race is indicative of Honda improving or KTM moving from stagnation to regression? Ananya Mishra says, do you think KTM's lack of performance will have a negative impact on KTM's chance of continuing MotoGP? And Kieran says, what can KTM realistically do to salvage their season? How long until Acosta announces he's leaving? We can go straight to that blunt question, if you like, first. Simon, how long till Acosta announces he's leaving KTM? And what do you think of KTM's situation right now?
I mean, I'm going to answer the second one first. This is bad for KTM. It's really bad. Things are not going well at all. But I think it's important to caveat the whole thing by saying, don't think it's related to the financial mess over winter. I think this is standard issue KTM losing their way like they seem to do like every 3 seasons on clockwork. And they just have a season where everything doesn't work at the start. And I mean, it's a bit of that combined with the fact that suddenly their rivals have got a whole lot faster. And I think that's making it look even worse because, if this were last year, they'd still be in fact, if this was last year, they'd be better off than they were this year because with the absence of Jorge Martin on an Aprilia and a bit of a struggle for there's 2 Aprilias out of the mix, essentially, right now because one of the riders is injured and the other has not had a good time. So they're not even benefiting from that by being the second manufacturer like they naturally should be because, oh, look, it's Ayagura, the rookie, smashing things. And then suddenly the Hondas are literally right in their tails. And the Hondas have been right in their tail for the first few races. I think in the coming races, it's going to be the Yamahas that are right on their tail, or at least a combination of the two. And suddenly KTM are finding themselves contesting last place in the championship, in the Constructors' Championship, because they need to get their finger out and start delivering a bit more than they are. It's so KTM, isn't it? How many times have we seen just like missteps and, attempts to over-engineer all their problems? We've talked about it to death on here, and they keep doing it. And there's an element of me that thinks, do you know what? Financial problems might not be a bad thing for this team because it might actually focus the engineers to stop trying to build new stuff to fix everything and just race what they've got. I mean, we finished preseason testing in the exact same place that we finished preseason testing the last 2 years with no idea what KTM's potential was because they hadn't built a race bike until the final day of testing.
Let me try to answer the Acosta thing, I guess. He won't announce it anytime soon because he's on a 2-year deal, so there's nothing to be gained from announcing anything necessarily. It's either, do you have a way out of the 2-year deal and do you want to use it? And if so, then you'll do it without really trying to announce anything. And if not, then there's no point in deciding anything right now. I think, any termination that isn't Acosta unilateral, and I just cannot imagine there's something in the contract that would just let him walk away. So any termination, I think, would have to be joint in some capacity. But if KTM lets Acosta go, then you might as well shutter the program right now because that's an admission of, we cannot do this. We cannot hack it. Go do it with somebody else who can. It's been a grim start to the season. We found a bike that is still, good at what it does, but isn't good in any set of conditions necessarily, isn't outstanding good, right? Is it a fantastic qualifying bike? Doesn't look that way. Is it a particularly good race bike? Doesn't look that way. Is it a good rain bike? We don't know yet. Maybe it's the best rain bike ever, but I would be quite shocked, honestly. The Honda, Jean Mir finished right behind, who was it? Brad Binder or Pedro Acosta? It was, so they were both behind Brad Binder, was it? Yeah. On Sunday at Termas. It was Jean Mir and Luca Marini. And obviously Jan Zarco was way, way, way ahead. The Honda was just much quicker. Just didn't qualify as well, but it was clearly much quicker at Termas. And the only reason Binder finished where he did is he did the usual Brad Binder race of getting to the front by being very, very good in the opening laps and then just hammering the brake. Hammering. Good luck overtaking me. No places to do it. So I'll run these tires off the rim, but I'll keep you behind. And that's exactly what he did. He made like one mistake and that let Fabio Di Giannantonio through, but also Di Giannantonio was infinitely faster, and that's a hobble Di Giannantonio on a softer rear tire. The KTM choose the tire very obviously. I think it is closer over one lap, but it's not closer to where you'd applaud anything. Closer. So for whatever that's worth, good. I think it might have less of a starting advantage than before, or at least that might be just the absence of Jack Miller. I'm not entirely sure. It's one of those two things. They've not done a horrific job. It's just, I don't know what to latch onto, if that makes sense. I don't know what the positive is. Even if they fix everything right now and they go clear second, isn't this supposed to be the season where they start regularly mixing it among the Ducatis? Ducati didn't even bring a new bike, effectively. Chucked most of the stuff it has new into the shredder. You still cannot touch them, cannot lay a glove on them. To me, that's an indictment. And the fact that Simon, and I think I agree with Simon, the fact that you don't feel that the financial troubles have necessarily caused this, it's actually bad, right? You want to use that as an excuse, and if they're not, then probably it's not actually a factor. But if that's worse, then...
Yeah, because they could latch onto that if they wanted to now, because it's not exactly the race team's fault that the parent company bought too many bicycles, effectively. So if they wanted to kind of use that as a, they could, I know it's not the greatest PR, but they could save some face by going, yeah, actually, we're doing this on a much lower budget in a very restricted circumstance. Make some bleak references to a turbulent winter and kind of get out of it that way. But like you say, they're not. The rear tyre chewing is alarming. Like sometimes you see the odd thing in testing where a picture comes out and it looks really alarming, and you go, well, that's probably like a one-off setup experiment or something just on that day, or a mistake that was a one-off in testing. And then we get to the races and they're ripping through the tires, they're tumbling backwards. That turns out to be a genuinely real thing. Pedro Acosta at the end of Termas saying he had an arm pump for the first time in his career. Was that anything to do with what the bike was doing, or Simon, or do you think that was just a kind of coincidence? It just seemed like everything is coming together right now for Acosta, something he'd be having arm pump as well.
He was really weird about it after the race, where he was like, we know the reason for this, but we're not going to tell you what it is.
He's saying vibration? Is that what he's trying to say?
He was saying it wasn't the bike, wasn't he?
Well, vibration is the tire, I would guess. You could argue.
But it's caused by the bike, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, the tyre might vibrate more if it's got like a massive groove down the middle and lumps of rubber flying off it because your bike's eating it. So that could have been something to do with...
I mean, they've definitely publicly acknowledged that the vibration is still a situation, but it's also still a situation for Honda, and the Honda flat out looked better at Termas. So there's no two ways around it. The Honda was a better, more impressive bike. The Termas to rear Honda, still vibrating, so...
Like you say, Val, KTM's not actually had a shocker of a winter. It's had a standing still winter in terms of performance. This isn't disastrous. This isn't like Honda, Yamaha of recent years territory. But it's just when you bring attention on yourself by having really huge financial problems, and when you bring attention on yourself by signing the best young rider of the generation to your works team, someone who's clearly got ambitions to win a title tomorrow, you kind of need to not just tread water with some worrying elements. KTM needs to be a top team really right now, doesn't it?
Yes. Yeah, I think so. And I also, there was a question about the 2027 project, right? And whether that would be impacted by the current performance.
Well, it's not even just like the quality of the 2027 project,
like,
but whether that even bother if it's
would it be greenlit? I
Yeah.
cannot answer that, and I cannot speak for the people making that decision. All I'm saying is that if I was making that decision, you bet it would impact it. You 100% bet, because I mean, yeah, they're still, they're obviously gaining exposure. They're still running at or towards the front. The program is respectable, and I wrote a big thing about this, but a big chunk of the respectability is that when you employ Brad Binder, whatever you put to the track, it's going to finish 7th, 8th,
Yes.
whatever it is. It could be a shopping trolley with 2 wheels. He'll get it there, and he'll frustrate a bunch of riders. Maybe knock a couple off sometimes, but it'll be 8th.
If you haven't seen that, listeners, that by the time this podcast comes out, that will be up on the race website. Look for the Brad Binder paradox, basically, and that is Val being very Val about Brad Binder in a glorious way.
But I think at KTM's, the idea is to win. I think the idea is that to make the investment worthwhile and to make all of this time worthwhile, you gotta get at least a title at some point. And so far, the technical structure has not proven it can do that. That's harsh to say about a bunch of people's really hard work, and a bike that at some points has really impressed. I mean, I still go back to 2020 and the slight culture shock of how good that RC16 suddenly was. But it's been a while, hasn't it? Since KTM's not new to MotoGP anymore.
No,
KTM's had a lot of years in this reg cycle, and it just hasn't quite got there, and the time is running out.
And also part of the 2020 thing as well was like, you got that influx of young riders in their program that year as well, and that was like, oh, look at what these kids are doing with the KTM. And Acosta obviously looked great last year, but not more great than KTM had looked, just that it was notable that he was the one doing it. This year, even the best kid out there is not making this bike look particularly good. Simon, when Acosta kind of sits down in front of you at the end of these races, he sounds pretty diplomatic, pretty pragmatic in what we hear. How's he looking?
I mean, he's someone that doesn't like to complain, right? I think that's part of his character, is that he's quite bullish about these things, and he's not going to be someone that's putting excuses on a bike or whatever. But I mean, it increasingly feels like there's a bit of frustration, especially after the sprint race in Argentina. There was quite a bit of frustration from him on the Saturday afternoon about the way that things had progressed, about the way that the race had worked. And actually, I think they had this problem where the bike worked well at the start, which he doesn't believe in any way suits him as someone that he gets stronger as races goes on. And it's just it sounds in a word like the whole program's a bit lost. Like they don't know whether they're coming or going. And we've had that before with KTM. That is not a new thing with this team, is it?
We had the question about when is Acosta going to announce he's leaving. Like you said, Val, contractually he can't. Contractually it has to get to a point where KTM is in a position where it decides to let him go because it can't fulfill his contract almost. Other than that, he's just seeing this contract out and looking for his next move. Despite that, pretty much every time I look at the internet, there is a story about Acosta and VR46 popping up in a feed for me somewhere. We've made the case that actually Honda and Acosta make so much sense. Well, two of us made that case. Val made some noises, which he may do again. Should we address the VR46 thing? Like, how realistic is that? I do get that if you're Acosta right now, you're probably deep down, whatever you're saying, you're thinking, I should be on that Ducati. That's the best bike. I'm the best guy out there. So get me on that bike. What's my route to it? And if you're Ducati, you're thinking, we like to stop our rivals. However many amazing riders we've got, part of our business is stopping our rivals having any other riders who might be amazing until we kind of mess that up and they all leave in one go. Val, if he was to go in whatever year, where do you see him going? Is VR46 like an obvious route or what?
I kind of, there's a part of me that really does see the appeal. For starters, for VR46, obviously personal loyalties will always play a big part, and I still like, I close my eyes and I cannot imagine a situation where they look at Franco Morbidelli at the end of the year and they go, thanks, but no thanks. It's just, he's their guy. It's so rare in sports that somebody lets their guy go, that somebody tells their guy, okay, goodbye. Like Uccio Salucci was basically gloating, speaking to TNT Sports after Morbidelli's podium, telling everybody that, see, Morbidelli's not finished. You all said he was finished. He's not finished. Well, yes, he is not finished. True. that would not be my main consideration when a rider of Pedro Acosta's caliber is somewhere on the horizon, but it could very well be for VR46. I think there must be an appeal for, their title sponsor, for even Rossi himself, for all the personal loyalty of seeing, Gresini had that magical year with Marc Marquez. How about we try for a Marc Marquez level talent in our satellite team? Whether that's Acosta, honestly, I would play for Fabio Quartararo and his insanely large fan base. I would try that at some point.
Yeah.
But for me, the hang up besides that is financially, how does that work? How does a satellite team offer to compensate Acosta for the money that he, at the stage of the career that he's at, his big payday is still ahead, I would imagine, or at least it's going on right now. Like this one should be major. And how do you give that up midway through? How do you give up a big payday with a Honda or a Yamaha who will trip over themselves 50 times to sign you? How does VR46 compete with that? How do you do the Red Bull Monster thing? It just sounds so complicated.
It's also entirely possible that there is a clause in his contract that will allow him to leave KTM, but that he has to buy his way out.
Yeah.
And VR46 do not have the money for that.
And I
Who
guess
does? I would imagine.
Yeah,
it's
I imagine that is
KTM.
huge.
Yeah.
Yeah, KTM, that's the people who have the money traditionally to do stuff like this, because Red Bull make it happen.
And KTM, they don't, like, when a KTM contract has holes in it, it's not usually holes that benefit the rider from our experience, because it's sort of that Red Bull family of contracts, right, where there's options, but they're not rider side options necessarily, which, we've not seen the contracts, but those are the options that we've heard about. Those are the options that we've seen executed, not necessarily something on the rider side. Johan Zarco didn't quit KTM. He had to go to KTM and ask, let me go.
Yeah, please sack me, effectively.
Yeah, and they did. They obliged. Yeah. But with Pedro Acosta, maybe would be a tiny bit different, unless KTM just packed up and left.
Yeah. Also, you could look at it and go, well, Acosta wants to succeed so much. Why does he care about the cash? He'll just get himself on the best bike. But when you've got Acosta's level talent, you back yourself to go, someone is going to pay me a ton of money. I don't need to compromise. One of these manufacturers should hose money at me because I'm going to win for them. So,
it's impossible to ask any of these guys to work for less money than they feel they can make on the market. It's like it takes a truly one-of-a-kind situation where a rider agrees to do that. Marc Marquez, who already earned basically everything he was going to need to earn, won everything he was going to need to win, except for now he wants to win a little bit more. Look, anything's possible, I guess. I shouldn't dismiss it out of hand. It's just the hurdles feel enormous. Sometimes the romance overcomes the hurdles. It happens. Sometimes, maybe Rossi goes nuts about the idea of having Acosta on his bike. Pertamina goes nuts about having Acosta on one of its yellow bikes, and Acosta goes nuts about the idea of riding for Rossi and riding a Ducati. He is a bit of a romantic.
He is, isn't he? He knows his history massively.
And I don't think you need a lot of convincing to go on the Ducati. Not a hard sell, but there's so many hurdles, right?
Do you remember when we were talking about what an amazing strength and depth lineup KTM had across its 4 bikes going into this year? Yes. Do you remember the other guys involved in that? Tech 3, Maverick Vinales, Nia Bastianini. We talk about people in trouble. KTM is in trouble. Whew, those two. Wow. Johnny W kind of sums up saying, I know it's probably too late, but I really hope it improves for the Tech 3 riders. Val, you're kind of Captain Vinales around here.
Wow.
I've listened to Vinales' debriefs after sessions and races this year, and much like Vinales in any situation, listeners are doing a hand gesture of an up and down wave at this point, because sometimes he sounds like the happiest, most crazy, optimistic man in the world, and sometimes he sounds like someone currently riding a Tech 3 KTM.
It's complicated because, referring to that comment, like, I know it's probably too late. I mean, it really shouldn't be. It shouldn't be after two races into 20. But I understand the sentiment, because it feels like it's rare that people dig themselves out of a hole this big. Yeah. and become hugely impactful mid-season, right? So both Vinales and Bastianini, to be where they want to be, they would have to not just continue gradual improvement on the KTM. They'd have to take very sizable steps. I think they are being a bit hurt their perception by the fact the bike's not right now. I'm confident that's a big part of it. I remember listening to Vinales after the Termas race. And when I say listening to the recording Simon sent, I wasn't there. I'm not trying to steal valor. Simon was there. He was the one talking to those guys. But I was listening to that recording, and he mentioned something like that his race pace was comparable to the Works guys. And I was like, that can't be true. That's usual rider hyperbole. And I look at it, I'm like, it isn't true. And then I look at the used tire times, and I'm like, oh, there it is. That's what he means.
Okay.
That's the selective bit he's talking about.
Yeah.
So both he and Bastianini are in a situation where they can't exploit it over one lap so much or over on fresh tires so much. But then they get up to speed on new tires, or on used tires. The problem is the current KTM sucks on used tires, makes them very used, clearly, as we've seen in race distances. So still a bit of an enigma as to the exact performance patterns, but also it's a bad circumstance to assess them and for them to show what they can actually do on the bike. And we're running this gauntlet of races. It's tough. It is tougher than I expected it would be. It's not a total write-off, but it really doesn't help that the bike isn't in a good situation.
These are the two guys who you do not want to have a bike quirk sensitivity to deal with either. They're to me, they're doing exactly what you expect Vinales and Bastianini to do, but just 10 places further back. Vinales is like, oh, there he is, always gone. Bastianini's qualifying nowhere, and then suddenly he's much better in the race, but it's all happening so much further down the field than if they're on a decent bike. We're talking about people in trouble in MotoGP at the moment. You can't get much more in trouble than your 5th notable injury in 2 years, and one that looks like it might knock you off the grid for a little bit longer than you hope as well.
5th injury in 2 years inflicted by someone else.
Yes.
Well, no, one of them was him.
One of them was him, sorry,
himself,
yeah.
yeah.
All the rest weren't.
1 out of 5 is still pretty good. Miguel Oliveira is sidelined again after his crash with Fermin Aldeguer. Augusto Fernandez, hi Augusto, someone we're quite fond of, would love to see doing well, back on the Pramac Yamaha in place of Oliveira for at least the next round. Oliveira's latest injury got a lot of sympathy in the members club. JD said, do the rules allow for Mario Kart-style revolving ring of red turtle shells around Miguel Oliveira so people stop crashing into him? And Angelina suggested some kind of hamster ball around his bike. Val, you were both looking at this morning. Tell us about Oliveira's latest injury. Obviously, we can't really be kind of prognosis-y, but it's when he had the crash, it seemed like he might be back on the bike next day. It's not that at all, is it?
Yeah, it's not that at all, because I think it's a dislocation of the joint, and it includes, basically ruptured ligaments or something like that in the shoulder or somewhere there in the collarbone, etc. I'm pointing to my right side, but it's actually on the left. So good job, Val. Great visual content, wrong and also bad for podcast listening. But yeah, I don't know. I'm not in terms of recovery. I wouldn't know what that means, but I think first of all, short shoulder ligaments, bad news. Generally, I would say doesn't sound like something that recovers easy and recovers good. It sounds like, they're not putting any recovery timeline on it, because I suspect they know that it's really, really nebulous, because again, it's such a nasty little injury. They didn't spot it immediately coming out, but now they've had a closer look, and clearly there's a fair bit of damage there. And you obviously, Kota, maybe missing Kota isn't so alarming, because I think injured riders, they tend to want to miss Kota, and it makes sense to miss Kota, because Kota's going to really put you through the ringer. So if you're not ready, no point in going. But it sounds like it's going to be a little while, and any loss of momentum, it's bad. Remember, Miguel could have been I still think could have been a huge hit for Aprilia and on the Aprilia. Maybe not whatever championship winning, etc., regular front runner, etc. But I think it could have been a big success, and the injuries just really wrecked that. There is a huge, I think, correlation between what happened to him injury-wise and the fact that he, in the end, was deemed surplus to requirements by Trackhouse.
I tend to be Oliveira skeptic in terms of consistency of achieving his potential. I think his potential in his best races is great, but you just didn't see enough of it. But I would totally agree, like during a period of time, 4 severe injuries in that time. You never got to see if that partnership was actually successful or not. It was just a constant run of recoveries and new injuries. And for his Yamaha stint to start out like that as well.
Yeah.
It's really, really not good.
At least he was fast at the start of the Aprilia stint. The Yamaha stint hadn't started so well.
True.
He was a bit off. He wasn't horrible, but he was a bit off Jack Miller. He was a bit off Alex Rins. He was a bit off Fabio Quartararo, just a bit off. And maybe getting somewhere, it would have depended on the run of tracks. But now you add that sort of, adaptation lag, and now you add the injury lag. So is Miguel Oliveira's season going to start now midway through?
At best, surely.
Yeah.
And also Yamaha is a team that you both flagged up in our choice of who's in trouble, because we got excited about Yamaha after the Sepang test. We acknowledged at the time, not a bad Yamaha track, plus a lot of rubber on the track, 3 days of shakedown, 2 days of full testing. We got excited, but we kind of caveated it. I don't think we expected it would be this bad. As Alexander Law in the Race Members Club on Patreon put it, is Yamaha's current performance a concern given the upside that was seen during pre-season testing? I mean, we actually kind of sort of did a video thumbnail that hinted that Yamaha might be Ducati's main rival this year, which I'm not sure if I regret now. Don't look too far back in the YouTube channel, listeners. Simon, were we all wrong about Yamaha? Were we too optimistic, or is this just a kind of circuit so far blip?
I think this is circuit so far blip, because they weren't that far away in Buriram, which should have been an absolute disaster. Like, Buriram should have been a really, really bad circuit, and in reality they were further away, a bit more uncomfortable in Argentina than they were in Thailand. So I think this is just they are in that rebuilding process where some circuits are going to be really good for them this year and some aren't, and they're just going to have to deal with that until they're better all round and a more consistent level all round. But I think there's still absolutely places this year where I'm expecting to see Fabio Quartararo fighting for podiums again, right in there with maybe not with the red Ducatis, but with all the others. It's just that Termisterio, Hondo, and Buriram aren't them.
My vague recollection of the start of last season is that, of course, the big alarming point was that they were absolutely horrific over single lap, like weekend ruinously. So at that point, you might as well not show up. But the race pace at the start of the season also kind of was lagging behind what you'd expect normally from Yamaha, and then sorted itself out. I think if the race pace catches up, the qualifying step has been made. It still appears to me legitimate. I think that even, Alex Rins popping up in Q2 that past weekend was a complete byproduct of him grabbing a toe from Marc Marquez during one of Marc's numerous record laps. But I still don't think that was doable last year, so...
No, and given that as well, Rins did not go as far backwards in the race. I know he went backwards, but it wasn't a complete plummet through the field. For a guy who was still a long way from fitness, he switched back to a leg brace nearly 2 years after that injury for walking off the bike, which is horrible to think about. But Rins is not up to full speed, yet he didn't drop horrendously down the field after a completely toe-assisted qualifying lap. That is like you say, that's saying Yamaha would have plunged 6 months ago.
It part of it comes back to this problem of modern MotoGP where you finish where you qualify, and it shows why it's important now that people like Rins are able at least to hang on to others for one lap, because it means that it boosts their standing, it boosts their results. And there was a point where the Yamaha wasn't very good at being able to hang on to other bikes. And we saw that it worked really well for him, to the extent that Quartararo kind of admitted that maybe it's something that he has to look at doing in the future, because you know what, if that's what it takes, doesn't matter if it's a little bit, whatever you want to call it. I don't think it's unfair in any way. It's part of the game. But there are more signs for me that things are not too bad here, that things can improve, and that's one of them as well, to be honest. Like, if he's just had a realization of, if I follow a red bike, I can qualify in the second row and then finish fifth. That's not a Yamaha failing if it's taken him until now to realize that.
No.
Remember, Fabio did try to, that same session that Rins was fifth, Fabio tried to also follow a Ducati red bike with Pecco Bagnaia. Bagnaia crashed immediately in front of him, just right away, removed himself from the equation. Then Quartararo, at that point, I was like, because I felt it would have been unfair that Quartararo, who I think was faster, was going to miss out on the top 10 while Rins got in by towing somebody else. Except Quartararo just did the lap by himself anyway and got himself in. It was a fantastic lap. It was hugely responsible for what a lot of people perceived as an inflated ranking for Quartararo at the end of the weekend from me. But I was like, he's got the juice. He's still got the speed. He can still produce lap times that don't really totally align with what you would expect.
I'm going to stop you there, Val, on the subject that Val has taken over the Grand Prix rider rankings from Simon this year, which we're, it was great. Simon's a great fun, Val's a great fun, different approaches, fun outcomes both ways. Our F1 driver rankings, Ed Straw does a unique to Patreon debrief on those where the members can quiz him. We haven't yet asked Val to do that for MotoGP. If you're in the members club and you fancy that, let us know in the community, and we'll. Val didn't grimace at that. He seems happy.
No, I'm grimacing at the expected responses of "Please God, no." Let him keep his thoughts to himself. There's already way too many of them, which I think it would be fair enough.
Yeah. On the subject of like how Yamaha laps are being achieved, part of me listening to Quartararo going, maybe I should try getting a tow from Marquez. Maybe think, can we not have qualifying sessions where everyone is tripping over themselves trying to get a tow from a red Ducati? That's not a spectacle I want to see. But at the same time, yeah.
I'm with Simon that I don't think it's unfair, but I just hate it. Like, it doesn't... It's because I want to know who's actually fast over one lap. That's what if we're going to spend so much time qualifying, and if it's going to matter so much, then actually, like, I want to know the actual hierarchy and not who went out of the pits at the right time and who outfoxed who. That's sometimes fun, but it feels like too many qualifying sessions and too much data is being skewed by all that goddamn nonsense.
Last thought on Yamaha. Simon, you said it's the tracks. They haven't had the Yamaha tracks yet. When do they get to their tracks? When do we actually see if this Yamaha thing is real?
I mean, Jerez will be an indicator. Jerez will be an
Yeah.
indicator, I think. And then after that little run of European races will be quite indicative. Assen will be the day I'm happy to finally pass judgment on whether or not this bike is good or not.
Kota, I know it's got enough fast corners and kind of flowing bits, but probably the straights are going to hurt. I guess their power out of the corners onto those long straights, possibly.
Yeah, but they've surprisingly good results at Kota over the years.
And we know what Rins can do kind of completely out of nowhere on an uncompetitive Japanese bike at Kota.
Exactly.
So.
And now he's got, getting a bit back close to fitness, that's all steps in the right direction.
One of the benefits of being in the Race Members Club on Patreon is that you can kind of call us up on everything we get wrong, which you do in a friendly way most of the time. So here's Cardiff Giant saying, I brought this up in the chat during round 1 and Val still defended him. Are we now going to admit that Raul Fernandez is never going to have that magical breakthrough? Val, you did put Raul in your box of people in trouble. Cardiff Giant, I did over-egg your voice. I've never heard your voice, but I gave it as much dramatic energy as I could at that point for your outrage at our faith in Raul Fernandez. You think he's in trouble now, Val. As Cardiff Giant said, are we ever going to see that magical breakthrough? I completely agree. Agura has really just put yet more questions on Raul Fernandez.
He's right. But, look, it would be bad process for me to completely change tack after, like, 1 or 2 weekends. And to completely, change what I axiomatically believe, which is when you've had a Moto2 season this good, there is some combination of environment, bike, etc., that can get this out. For me, the more important question, because, you can be good in theory, you can be world champion 50 times of theory or of testing, maybe potentially, not to mention any names, but it doesn't matter at a certain point if it requires too much. Like, at a certain point, the question is it worth it to try to extract it, to try the million combinations, replace crew chief, replace etc., replace staffers, try to do a new bike for another team to take them on, etc. And I have to be honest, we are approaching the point where the answer to that question is more no than yes. Yeah, that's all I got. If I was a MotoGP team boss right now, I would say no.
MotoGP is a really, really, really human sport. I think, much more than any other form of motorsport. You've got to be in, everything has to be right for these riders with everything they're up against physically and the danger they're facing at the speeds they're going to get their absolute peak performance. But let's say there's 100 different scenarios in terms of combination of conditions, personnel around you, the bike, the setup. To be Marquez level, you're probably at your best in maybe like 95 out of those 100 scenarios.
Yes.
Raul Fernandez seems to be at his best in about 2 of them, and they happened during his Moto2 season, which I agree was a really special performance in a category where rookies just do not do what he did. But it just seems like whatever that narrow window where he really becomes superhuman was just that, and maybe a few laps in MotoGP since, because I just haven't seen it. Simon, where do you stand on Raul at the moment?
There's part of me that thinks that the more I listen to him, the more I wonder if there's other things going on. Because when you hear a rider saying, we went all the way one way with the bike on Friday and it didn't work, so we had to go all the way back again to the other direction on Saturday, that's big steps to be making in a race weekend. And like they've had, I know he missed a bit of testing, as is tradition, and they're chasing their tails a bit because of it, but I just wonder if maybe there's a bit more going on than we understand at the minute, and if there's a maybe not totally unexpected, announcement coming at some point that he's switching crew chief or switching data engineer or something like that to try and find a bit more consistency. I don't think he's awful, because we saw what he could do in Moto2, and like he just needs he needs a Frankie Carcetti. He needs one of those guys that can take a diamond in the rough and process it into something really, really special, like Carcetti did with Di Giannantonio. That's what
great comparison.
Fernandez needs right now, and it's not there. And that's no slight to his current team. But he's worked with them for a long time, and they're still making big adjustments to the bike in a race weekend, which hints to me that there's a fundamental problem somewhere in the system.
I agree, but I think it is also fair to those guys to say other crew chiefs are in a position not to do that because their guy isn't 2 seconds off on Friday.
No, of course.
Yeah. Like, because, it's going to be chicken and egg. It's going to be...
Exactly. Words out of my mouth.
And you just can't, right now, you can't be making huge swinging changes to a MotoGP weekend because you've got 1.5 sessions that don't really matter for outright pace and everything else. You've just got to be fast, otherwise you're in the wrong half of qualifying, you're nowhere on the grid, then you're not moving forward. So you've got to kind of make what you've got work as best you can and save the experiments for the post-race tests or, the odd bit of warm-up or final practice at best. But even then you don't screw your qualifying. It's just, you can't be rethinking your engineering mid-weekend, because there's no such thing as mid-weekend anymore. Mid-weekend is about that big. And I did a very small hand gesture showing a small thing there, because I'm going to be because we think this podcast will probably be one of the first ones we put clips out on our YouTube channel, so I'm doing quite a lot of gestures in it, but then having to kind of explain my mimes to the mostly audio-based audience.
I have a question for you before we go to the final bit. Saying it's time to give up on a rider, is that okay? Does that feel wrong?
Like morally, do you mean?
No, like analytically. In a world with Fabio Di Giannantonio, for instance, can we say that about?
You can. Thing is, there are still 20-ish seats on this grid, and you can't wait indefinitely.
I agree.
When you've got a numerically stacked MotoGP, Moto3, Junior GP, Red Bull Rookies field, all these people, tangents off in the Superbike paddock as well, who might think they could be in this paddock, and maybe some I'm sure have a case as well. If you're occupying one of these 20 seats, I don't like criticizing people who are obviously massively more talented than I could ever be, but you have to do it through the prism of there are 20 of these opportunities in the universe. It is not wrong to say, are you good enough for one of those? That's kind of my moral take on this. So, question for you two. I said at the start of planning this morning, throw in your riders and teams who are in trouble. Neither of you said Pecco Bagnaia, which struck me as interesting because, to me, a guy who would expect to be fighting for a title who's currently getting smashed by both his new teammate and his new teammate's little brother on a satellite bike is in trouble. Simon, why did Pecco not come into your head as a rider in trouble?
Because we've seen Pecco in this position before, and he's found his way out of it and won a championship in the same season. Basically, I think
not against Mark though.
Yeah, no, I know, but like maybe there's an element of my thinking and his of how do you win a championship against Mark anyway?
I know that's your feeling, but I just think there's no way Pecco came into this season thinking anything other than, yeah, I can do this. This is my team. I'm a double champion. I could have been a 4-time champion. I can do this. Val, why is Pecco not in your mind as a rider in trouble?
Yeah, same reason as Simon, I think. Plus, I think there's been a bit of an over-exaggeration over how much trouble he's in. I mean, you read some of the stuff that's being said. You listen to some of the takes about the balance shift of power within Ducati, etc. And it's like he's finishing like 20, 30 seconds behind. It's like he's late era Yamaha Ben Spies. Sorry, Ben Spies. Against Jorge Lorenzo. Again, sorry, Ben Spies. At his best, Ben Spies was quite good. But when it went wrong for Ben Spies, it really went wrong. And it wasn't quite. We went to, like, just this weekend, went to a really bad, demonstrably Pecco track at Termas, and he still scored okay. That's number one. But number two is, he's going to finish second in the championship, I think. For me, it's difficult for me to call that in trouble, right? For me, in trouble is people who are going to lose their ride or who are making bikes that cannot win.
Yeah, finishing second to the greatest of all time, arguably the greatest of all time, isn't really in trouble, is it?
I agree.
I still argue it is when your mission is to beat that greatest of all time, and you wouldn't be on that bike if you didn't think you were capable of it, and you wouldn't be on that bike if your employer and thought you were capable of it in the first place.
By that theory, was Lorenzo's 2014 season a disaster? Because that's basically the position we're in, right? This is Lorenzo against Marquez.
As well, though. This is the intra-team thing to me. It's like again, by the time you listen to this / watch this, there'll be a piece on the race website where we've all given our thoughts on Alex Marquez's title potential. And my entry in that is basically go, look at the actual results. You're all saying it's Alex Marquez. He's not going to win title. Second, testing. First, second, or something like that. Second, first. He's top two all the time. Yeah, he probably won't beat Mark for the title, but you can't go, yeah, inconsistent, slow Alex Marquez. He's not. Literally, he's not. Bagnaia is only just making the podium right now. I love Pecco. I really want to see him come back and make a title fight of this. Right now, he is factually in trouble in terms of what his job description says he should be doing versus what is happening on track.
But I think, to be fair, what we're saying is a lot meaner and harsher to Bagnaia than what you're saying, I guess, in a certain prism, right?
Yeah, you're just saying it's not good enough. I'm saying it should be good enough.
Not really. But we're saying, like, accept it. It's fine. Second's okay. Which probably tells you why we're not in MotoGP as riders, potentially. Second's okay. You're still going, home to a good salary at the end of the day. All's good.
Okay, we'll leave it on that jaunty note. If you're in the members club already and you haven't checked it out yet, Le Mans 2015 was the latest race in our 2015 Revisited series. Went out on Patreon on Friday. If you want to be part of us reliving that absolutely epic and at the end slightly eventful season, please do find us on Patreon to join the members club. We have COTA coming up. It'll be a little bit of a late one on European time for me and Val, so expect some epically meandering bleariness alongside hopefully some decent insight when we're back in your ears at the end of this weekend.
Never.
No chance. Totally coherent. And all our predictions are well-rounded in reality and normally come true.